Hey everybody, it's noon Pacific on a Monday, so you know what time it is. It's content chat time. And today we have a special transatlantic guest for whom it is certainly not noon Pacific time.
It
So,
is not.
Christine, thank you so much for joining us today.
Happy
Uh,
to be here.
and I love the beautiful pink glow, very on brand for you.
Well, it's funny because I'm actually at a friend's house and he was like, "Oh, I can put on the, red lights behind you." I'm like, "You don't have to go crazy, but it is lovely. I'll tell him that you noticed."
I love it. And of course, the reason I mention how on brand this is because today we're going to be talking about personal branding.
Mhm.
And what I have found is so many content marketers spend all of our time working on someone else's brand, such as creating an executive thought leadership platform, creating content marketing that reflects the brand. But we can sometimes overlook the importance of making sure that we still have our own personal brand that's out there, because it can actually even help that work that we're doing. I mean, it can help, obviously, you find your next job. It can help you connect with people, so many things. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So if that's what you've tuned in for on LinkedIn and or for the replay over on YouTube, that is what we're talking with Christine about today. It's all about personal branding. So
You're
just
in the right place, folks.
so kicking things off, when you're thinking about the coming year for content marketers, why is it so important for them to create a personal brand?
Well, it's more important now than ever because it's always been important. I'm a little biased there. When you're a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. So I'm like, yes, personal branding, woo! But I think it's extra important because we really have, in this stage of our internet lives, reached a place of content fatigue. There's just so much out there all the time just being thrust in our faces. And it's harder than ever to get people's attention, to deserve people's attention,
Mhm.
and to get them coming back for more, and to not get lost in the shuffle. If someone sees a piece of content come across their feed, are they going to, first of all, bother to consume it? But if they do, are they going to remember that it's you? Is that impression, is that brand touch, as it were, going to help build your brand? Or is it just going to be a one off experience? And the real difference between the two is if you have that strong personal brand foundation behind it, so that the next time that they encounter you, you're speaking about a similar topic, or you are doing a similar type of content, or even just like your brand voice, or even just your face. Something is consistent that kind of caught in their brain last time. So that means that those brand impressions can compound instead of standing alone as one offs. When you do have that kind of recognizable, clear point of view, or the way that you show up from a content perspective. And I know it's content chat, so that's why I'm talking about content, because beyond just content, but that's, of course, the way we give voice to our brands. But I think that that glut of content, the fact that attention is an all-time premium, really emphasizes how important it remains to have a strong personal brand.
Totally agree. I mean, people are not looking to get more content from somebody
No.
wearing a blue button-down shirt with a Patagonia vest, you know?
Unless that's your thing. If that's your thing, you gotta own it, but at the same time, you have a little extra hurdle there to, stand out about amongst those other bros.
That's right. Because it is funny because, now people are more likely to be sending those marketing emails from a human being.
Yeah.
But so often those images that are coming across with those emails even, they don't feel that differentiated. So
Mm.
I think that's kind of a good entryway for us to start talking about, when you're thinking about a personal brand platform, and building that, what are some of the core elements that you need to be thinking about? Like for you, obviously, a core part of your personal brand is the color red. You wear it on your
Yes.
lips, frequently wear it on your clothes. When I see an animated GIF of a lady in red, it's usually you. And if it's not
It's
you, I
usually
still think
me.
it's you.
You can't escape it. Again, there's that glut of content there. Some of it's mine. But yeah, but really, I mean, that's the window dressing. The real point of a personal brand, the real foundation you need to have in place for a personal brand. Um, it's not even, I'm not going to go all Simon Sinek here and say start with why. It goes to it has to be more about them. Why should they give you their attention? Why does this piece of content, why does this brand voice, why does this brand, why does this person on their screen need to be there? Like, I think the first part of figuring out your personal brand platform is kind of justifying your existence as a brand in a
Or
sense.
defining your
Why
value
are
prop.
you going?
Yeah.
Sorry?
So developing your value prop and expressing it.
Yeah, why are you going to be worth their attention? What value do you bring to the table? And why do you need to be bringing it to the table? Like, no matter what it is that you do, no matter what it is that you are saying or doing or expounding upon, there's someone else who does it. So why should someone be paying attention to you? Why should they remember you for this? Why should they follow you for this? So I think that's a hugely important thing to figure out first and foremost when you're not only figuring out your personal brand and your brand values, as you said in the brand pillars, and of course, even those, the expressions of it, like the red and the fonts and the hashtag and all of those things really come down to, okay, but does this brand need to exist though? And I would say in most cases, one of the things that I work on with people is really unraveling, the fact that there is a yes in there for everybody. Everybody has something they can bring to the table that is unique. Everyone has value that they can bring that's uniquely theirs. They just need to uncover it and make sure that they're coming from a place of leading with that. Like, don't be out there because you want people to see your face. Be out there because you have something to really offer them. Because again, attention is a really limited resource now. Everyone's trying to grab a piece of it. Why are you going to be worth their attention? And whose attention are you going to be worth? And on what topics are you going to be worth it? And how are you going to convey those messages in a way that is worth it for them to consume? So it really does have to come a place of why you. Why should they care?
And I love that. It reminds me of a CEO I worked with. He would always say that from a content perspective, that we always had to remember that we were, broadcasting from a radio station WIIFM. What's in it for me? Because you've got to be able to serve up immediately for the people you're talking to, what value you bring that they can't get anywhere else. So that way they pay attention, and you've got to do that.
Exactly. Like, we're right here on Content Chat. We're chatting about content. You are bringing that value.
Exactly. We don't tend to talk about things other than content, except, and I love your mug. Mug again.
Yes. So fun fact. So where this is from. I got this from Marketing Profs. Lovely gift from Anne Hanley. Thank you, Anne. And I have literally just been reunited with this mug because I didn't have room in my bag to take it back to England from Boston. But right now I'm at the home of the friend who brought it back for me. So
that's so awesome. I love that.
So my mug and I are having our first cuppa together.
And I love that because getting a coffee mug that says world's best speaker in your speaker gift bag when you're going to a conference to present is such the shot in the arm of confidence and so on brand for the Marketing Profs folks and for Anne Hanley.
But which of us is the world's best speaker? I'm confused.
Both of us.
You know what? I'm the world's best speaker on personal branding, for people who are employed, because that's the thing that I talked about there. You're the world's best speaker on what you talked about there. You see, so we all get it.
It's true for all of us.
It's true for all of us.
So, you and I think, have done a lot of work in this area. So for us, it feels kind of like old hat, but for, content marketers who haven't really embarked upon defining and, living a personal brand for themselves, do you have any kind of a template or framework or process that you've used to help people document their personal brand platform?
I don't really. So I am starting to solidify that sort of thing just as I have the same types of conversations with different people and different clients. Yeah. But generally, I don't really templatize it so much just because it can be very individual. I would say it has to start with the what do you want to be the person for? Like you're the content chat person, I'm the personal brand person. You know, what do you want to be the person for? People need to know in what conversations you warrant being mentioned. So there's certainly that. How are you going to express it? And that does come to sort of like the as I said, the window dressing, you know, the branding stuff. For myself, for example, I was just kind of playing around, just being me, just doing things that I liked for a while. And then after a little while, I said, okay, it's time to officially, you know, codify this. And so I picked my official shade of red, and it is very consistent. And I had my particular typefaces, and I actually changed them. I did a rebrand in 2020 to stuff that I'm much happier with. But I figured out, okay, this is my, you know, showy font, and then this is the more readable font, and then this is, you know, and but and I do visual templates, but also some verbal templates for how I do things. I am behind on my email. I didn't send one last week because I had a death in the family and all sorts of nonsense. But generally speaking, my email, I have kind of a structure for, you know, okay, so I say something, you know, what's on my mind that relates to this topic, then here's how I mention the guest, then here's how I mention the show. So I do try to not reinvent the wheel
Yeah.
with the content that I'm creating to express and to build my brand. I do try to have certain consistent elements, because then again, people will recognize it. People will recognize that that's me. Normally I have a red curtain behind me. People recognize that that's me. So there are certainly elements that you want to make sure you define as consistent. And as we talked about, the topics are often consistent, but sometimes it's also your content format. Sometimes you're the person who does those TikToks that follow that format. You know, we all have those people who we follow. So
Yeah.
just figuring out what you will embrace and enjoy being consistent with, and then defining that and kind of owning it as much as possible. So those are the things that people can latch onto, and you can play around with the rest.
So that's kind of the, in a way, the good news and the bad news is content marketers, there's no escaping governance. You're always going to have to be doing that due diligence with your definition and documentation, even when you're talking about your personal branding, because it's really the only way that you can make sure that you are consistent and hold yourself accountable.
And it makes it easier too. My goodness, if you have to figure out all over again every single time you're staring at a blank page, how do I do this? That's terrible. Make it easier on yourself. People won't see it as you doing the same thing. They'll see it as you doing a consistent thing.
Yep, the same
Bring
way,
unique value every time and you're fine.
like when you turn into an HGTV show, you know
Yeah.
what the formula is for that show. You know
Yes.
how they're going to set things up, how they're going to structure it in the middle, what the outcome at the end is. And there's something that's just so comforting in having that, you know, knowing before you've committed your time to something, knowing what it is you're going to get from that kind of structural standpoint. So
Yeah, I studied film in college, and one thing that really blew my mind was officially seeing written down, okay, so here's when this story beat tends to happen, and this one does. And so when you watch movies now, kind of knowing a lot of those structures, you can't not see them, but it still works. It doesn't make them ineffective. It doesn't make them samey. It makes the consumer understand how to process it, because they have processed something with this same structure before. So that's all it is.
I love that. And then I'd say to play off of what you said, so it helps, you know, first, yes, it helps the person who's consuming the content. And then on the flip side, it helps you the same way that a recipe helps you, even if it's a recipe you've done many, many times, that recipe in place helps you have that starting point, helps you have that level of comfort and confidence about what you're doing.
And
That
you
makes
can still ad lib it. I mean, I have never put in the amount of garlic in a savory recipe or the amount of vanilla in a baking recipe that was written on the page. You just plug it on in. But
That's
the
right.
fact is, you know what you're doing. You have kind of guardrails, and then you can play.
Exactly. So thinking through maybe even what you're planning to do for next year, and what you've planned, what you've kind of encouraged others to do, what are some of the ways that content marketers can think about using content marketing to reinforce their personal brand for next year?
I'd definitely say, I mean, you should definitely start from a point of what you feel like geeking out on, quite frankly, because people always want to know, okay, this is the most strategic thing to do, or you should post on this platform this many times a week at these times of day, and that's going to be what does it. No, what does it is being worth consuming, and what makes something worth consuming, you can tell if someone created something because they had to or because they wanted to.
Yeah,
So really what I say to everyone is figure out what you won't hate creating, what you won't hate doing. And you can do it badly a whole bunch of times and then learn and get better at it and get consistent. If something really clicks, either because it feels good to you to create or because people consumed it and really loved it and engaged with it a lot, whatever, whichever direction the clicking comes from, something clicks, follow that hard, figure out what it was that clicked, do more of that. And if there comes kind of a side quest where you're like, okay, well, I was doing this, but I keep thinking about this, follow it, because really, where if you follow your passion for it and you really are spending time in that geek out zone, it's going to show. Enthusiasm is contagious.
I
And
could not agree
especially when
more.
it comes to content, my goodness. So if you can put the energy into the content that you actually feel like creating, that's going to be the thing. That's really the silver bullet there. It's not even, you need to be doing short form video with a strong hook at the beginning. I mean, sure, if that's what you feel like diving into, yeah, short form video with a strong hook at the beginning will help you out, unless you hate it, in which case it will not help you out. If you would rather write a blog, write a damn blog. So that's a big thing I would say. Look at what you won't hate creating, but I mean, do consider trying new things, being willing to be bad at them, being willing to try. But pay attention. Pay attention to what's clicking, not only in terms of what other people are engaging with, but also what's clicking with you, what's clicking in here, what makes you say, okay, I'm interested in geeking out on this a little bit more versus, do I have to do that again? I think that needs to be the core of every content strategy always and ever. And especially given what I said at the very beginning about how there's too much content out there right now. There just
Yeah,
really is. So it's not going to help you to make content to have made content. That's
totally.
not going to help you anymore. What's going to help you is content that cuts through. And what cuts through is going to be the stuff that you didn't hate making.
100%. I
Yeah.
actually have a client who hosts a podcast. And, while he loves the podcast, he had been recording it on video for the first few weeks because the marketing team wanted to have the video to be able to use snippets in social, which sounds
Mhm.
great, right? Except then he found he was spending too much time being concerned about what he looked like on
Yeah.
video and not enough time, maybe like scribbling down, things that the person was saying to do follow-ups. And
Audiograms are fine, people.
so that's
Get a
what he
nice
just did. He
picture and
eventually
have the
came
little
back
like
and started
sound
speaking about it.
thingies.
Yeah,
You can still do clips without video if you hate video.
exactly.
There's ways around everything.
So, I mean, I think that's what's so important is that folks can get really fixated on thinking they have to do
Mhm.
a specific thing. But if you really hate it or you're not comfortable with it, it's not going to come natural and you're not going to get that kind of engagement from other people with it because they're going to feel your discomfort. And I mean, I guess there's some people who like consuming content about other people's discomfort. Um,
Do
but I
you
don't
want
think
are
I'm going to
those
charge
people your
them.
core audience though? Is that your target market? Is Schadenfreude really one of your key brand value propositions?
Probably
Hopefully
not
not.
unless you're a comic, right? Then maybe so, but in B2B, not so much. So thinking through, kind of you and what you've been doing over the past year, what do you feel like have been um, like those things that you have been really passionate about and love that have been the best kind of activations for your personal brand?
Hmm. I love guesting on things. I love having conversations like this.
Yeah.
Because they make me think about things in different ways, and sometimes I hear something phrased a certain way coming out of my own mouth, and I'm like, "Oh, I haven't thought about it like that before. But it's like, but it's coming from me though.
Right.
So I do enjoy that. And of course, I similarly enjoy being on the opposite end of things. I've been so stubborn with hosting shows for all these years. I had a show called Social that was a weekly live stream, 2017 to 2020. I have what is now a podcast, but started out as a live stream. Let's Talk About Brand. And it's funny because at various times I've had people say to me, like, what do you get out of this? Do you get business from it? You know, or is it sponsored? Blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I just love it, man. But honestly, it's the best because first of all, it's something out there that people recognize me for. It's something out there that establishes me as being in that conversation. I'm in the conversation about personal branding. My goodness, I host a show on it. I have a conversation about it every week. But then also, I'm learning. I'm getting to learn things. I'm getting to up my game. I'm getting to get incredible insights from brilliant people. And I'm benefiting in that way hugely, but then I also get the additional benefit of creating content out of it and having my name next to that person
Yep.
and, you know, putting something out there where other people learn from something. And because I provided them with that, they feel like they learned it from me. So I just always love conversations. Conversations are always going to be my number one. I know you and I both share the absolute love of the dying art of the Twitter chat. It is really it's a trauma. I'm so sad about
It
it.
is.
But that also was just, you know, conversations. I love conversations. Similarly to you, have had to find a new format for content chat rather than just saying we're not going to do it anymore. You're saying, okay, we're
Yep.
going to do it like this. Similarly, I had a chat about brand, and I'm starting to kind of put a discussion question up on social media every weekday about that
Yep.
week's topic. And it still needs to catch, and I just screwed it up by skipping a week because life, but you know, but I'm like, you know what? I don't just want to talk to that one person that week. I want to talk to all these people that week
Yep.
too. Conversations are absolutely my favorite thing, and they make for great content as well, which is very lucky.
Totally. Cannot agree more.
Yeah, so
Um,
that's my jam.
so what's really fun, of course, is once you've been doing this stuff for a while and you put yourself out there and you become known for whatever that thing is that you're passionate about, that you are excited to share with others, then you start getting interesting opportunities
Mhm.
coming your way, such as you and I were just at Marketing Profs,
Yes.
doing, hands-on sessions with B2B marketers to help them, in your case, it was develop that personal brand. In my case, it was develop a style guide so that they would be ready to scale, be it through freelancers, agencies, or AI. So those are, that's one really obvious example of once you build that brand,
Mhm.
the kind of extra benefits that can happen. Are there some other kinds of opportunities you feel like folks are more likely to be invited to or have open up for them as they do build those brands?
Well, speaking is a very good one, as you mentioned. Similarly, you know, being a guest on podcasts and chats and things like that, instead of having to pitch yourself, you get invited, which is
Yeah.
lovely.
Oh, it's
In
nice to
fact,
be invited.
this very week on Wednesday, I'm the guest on a very big podcast,
Yay.
and I didn't ask, so it's very exciting. But I'll say another thing. I'd say the biggest advantage of a personal brand, honestly, like we've heard, those of us in the social media space have heard about how dark social is the most powerful thing of all. So it's not about what's on the public, you know, page, not about the public post. The real brilliance and the real gold is in the one-on-one conversations that people are having with each other or brands are having with people or whatever. It's about that stuff that's harder to track, but those kind of conversations. Similarly, in personal branding, the real value that's hard to track is that your name will come out of other people's mouths when they hear about opportunities. They will tell other people about you. If they hear
Yep.
someone saying, you know, I'm not sure what I'm doing with my content strategy, and they say, "Oh my goodness, you need to talk to Erika." That is huge. That is something that is, and then of course, we've all heard that X percentage of jobs are never advertised. They're
Yeah,
filled internally or they're filled through people's networks. That unadvertised job market. How do you get into that? You get into that because your name is on people's lips, because they know about you. So I
100%.
think that's really the huge thing. There's the big public opportunities, but then there's also the little private opportunities, and just having people who know in which context to bring your name up, to send people your way. I think that's really the biggest thing.
So true. And it's funny that you mentioned the the unadvertised jobs, because I'll tell
Yeah.
you, although I've been out on my own with the consultancy for the past 7 years, working with my freelance team. Before that, I want to say the prior 3 jobs that I had were tailored to me. They were not necessarily like, they were folks who they had a need, and maybe they had a job listing out there, but they ended up crafting a role for me specifically.
Mhm.
And that's because of, me being out there with all the stuff I was doing, which I will tell you has not always been super popular with some of my full-time employers.
Oh,
I
yeah, that's always a tricky one.
Right? Because I worked for a Fortune 500 company, and they instituted a social media policy towards the end of my tenure there. And it really it made it so that you couldn't do basically anything. And since I already had permission to do my freelance writing that I was doing for arts and entertainment, I had that in writing. So I had the ability to still do that. But I had, Twitter accounts, I had Discord accounts, I had all of these things I was doing that were 100% not allowed under
Yeah.
their social media policy. So I had the luck that I was allowed to work with legal and compliance on giving feedback to that policy, and
Yes.
I gave
Good.
enough feedback, and I understood it so well that I also understood how to circumvent the policy. And then I got it in writing that I understood correctly. And so the
Mhm.
way that you could circumvent the policy is to not ever say publicly what company I worked for. So guess what? I went to LinkedIn and I took off the company name. And
Wow.
instead, I had a way of describing the company that made it clear pretty much who it was. And I want to say about 50 of my immediate colleagues did the exact same thing,
And you know what? That's a huge loss for the company.
right?
Because instead, they could have had these 50 brilliant employees, sharing thoughts, getting known, getting their names and reputations and brilliance out there with the company's name right under theirs.
Right?
Huge miss. I understand why companies are worried. I really do. They're worried. First of all, they're worried that if you build a strong personal brand, you'll leave them.
Mhm.
To which I say, so you only want employees who don't have the option of working anywhere else? So there's that. But then there's also the fact that, yes, it is possible that an employee will behave publicly in a way that reflects poorly upon your company. I
Mhm.
think the risk of that and the likelihood of that, the incidence of that, is likely much, much lower than the best case scenario, which
Right.
is that your employees reflect well upon you. And by the way, employees can reflect poorly on you even if they never mention you on social media. So that's almost moot. Whereas the value that they can gain for you on their backs through their personal brands, I feel like that is much more likely to pan out in almost all circumstances. So I do believe that it is wise to have some level of, not exact, I guess, guidelines, just so that they're coming from a place of but I do think that employees who want to develop strong personal brands should bump up against those guidelines. They should stay, as close to the edge as they can, push those boundaries, question, as you did, question boundaries that don't make sense. Have the courage to do that. And I think that companies really should think a lot harder about providing a framework for employees to do this in a way that doesn't constrain them necessarily, but that makes it so that everybody's happy. Because when it comes down to it, it's just such a powerful tool. And I want to point also it is different from employee advocacy. So
Yes.
I've heard a lot of people say, "Oh, what you're talking about, Christine, sounds like employee advocacy." It's different. Employee advocacy is, Erika, if you had posted about something great that the company you worked for was doing, that's employee advocacy, as opposed to you just having, smart thoughts and great conversations and being in the larger conversation about your area of expertise and also being known to work for that company. That's what I'm talking about. That's you're building your personal brand, but it is also benefiting the company. Different things.
Yeah,
I
and
missed
thank you,
Carmen's
Carmen.
thing here. There's
Oh, sorry, I'll show it again. And thank you so much for mentioning this, Carmen, because, I worked
yes,
someplace where there were people in leadership who had the perspective I did not share, that if you worked
share the
there,
company's
it was
stuff.
mandatory that you share company stuff. And I
Do you know
disagree.
how boring that is if you follow multiple people who work for the same company? Oh my
And then
God,
we
it's
all
so
at the same time
obvious.
share the exact same content. So
Yes.
boring, right?
Yes.
But further, it's like if you flood social media with a bunch of one-off pieces of content from a bunch of people linking back to your site that nobody engages with because their audience is not, in fact, at all interested in
Yeah.
what your company does, you've just trained the algorithm for that platform that you publish junk and that your company is a bunch of spammers. And I can't imagine that's what any of us wanted, right?
No, the smartest thing to do is that your company has people who are experts in areas that your company is in. And so they should be rocking out their expertise. They're smart, they know their stuff, they're doing the job, they're hopefully interested in it. They should be developing thought leadership in that if they're interested. And that's good for you as a company because it means that now when people see, oh, there's a thought leader in this industry, they see your name with it, your company's name with it. I mean, that's the way to go. And the thing is, also the companies that are really smart and that understand the value of personal branding for their employees are also the company that retain those
Yeah.
superstar employees. Because the fact is, if you try to kind of compress, someone's activities and you say, no, you can't grow too big, we're threatened, whatever, you're going to lose them. Someone who values their brand is going to snap them up. Whereas if you say, you know what, we love this, good for you. I'm glad that your brilliance is being recognized. How can we help you? Or you even provide opportunities for them. Maybe your company sponsors an event and you give that employee an opportunity to be kind of front and center at some point. That's fantastic. You know what? That employee says, all right, I'm growing here. They recognize my talent. They're giving me an opportunity to grow. People don't want to change jobs. It's so annoying. If you can grow and be challenged and be acknowledged where you are, my goodness, most people are going to do that. So,
Totally.
yeah. Oh, I could talk about that all day. But no, yeah, I definitely think that the idea of kind of putting the kibosh on employee personal brands is very wrongheaded and a huge missed opportunity, especially now.
Totally. And, and with my HR hat on, so many companies now are taking more of a skills-based approach to the way that they're managing their internal talent versus
Mhm.
just you were hired for this job role and that's all you're going to do. And oh gosh, now we have a talent gap. Let's fire everybody and hire new people. Instead of having that kind of an attitude, more companies are thinking through, how do we make sure that we are developing skills? Well, let people develop those skills by them doing these things they're interested in and then grow your own skills pool and talent pool that way. It's such a great way to let people self-select for some of these, new things. Like for instance, probably a lot of people's employees have been using AI in their personal lives or
Hmm.
even in their work lives, but on their personal devices and figuring things out. So maybe your company wasn't ready to roll out AI, but hopefully you've gotten folks, who have gotten some experience using it so that way it's not going to be this uphill battle once you are ready to implement some of these technologies as a very current kind of example.
One of my first real experiences with personal branding and with social media as a business tool actually happened when I was a journalist. And I like to say that I was in there at the exact right time. This was like 2015, because a few years later, they probably had people on staff who were in charge of their digital strategy and their
Yeah.
social media strategy. And I don't think they had anyone in charge of personal branding, but it hadn't even been a conversation in the newsroom. And then they recognized that I kind of had a knack for it. And they promoted me for my skills. And they said, you know what? We're going to have you help everyone else learn this too, because you get it. So continue to geek out on it, continue to learn, share your learnings with the team, and help us out. And it was absolutely brilliant. Unfortunately, there then, they did lose me. I had to start my own business. But again, if they had been able to find the budget to keep me, I
Right.
would have done that. Um, but I think that was really great, because they were able to say, you know what, she's succeeding at something that we need to learn how to do.
Yep.
So I thought that was a really great thing for them to do, and kind of a great little moment there. And if it weren't for all the corporate red tape, they could have gone even further with it. But
Story of so many lives, I think, right there.
especially in journalism. I mean,
Yeah.
there's just the budget is just not there for anyone anymore.
For anything. Yeah.
Mm-mm.
100%.
No, but I love
So when you're working with somebody who does have that full-time job,
it. Mhm.
what advice do you have for them on how to, strike that balance of being out there and starting to build your personal brand, but also making it clear that you're not doing it just to find a new job. Like, how do you even have that conversation with your boss? Because I think a lot of folks probably try to just skirt under the radar, and I'm not sure that that's really the best approach if your goal isn't to have your boss freak out and think that you're trying to find a new job.
Yeah, well, one really big thing is you can't build a brand in secret. And I've talked to people who say, "Well, I've got this area, but then I've also got this area, so I'm gonna start 2 separate LinkedIn profiles." No. They're both part of your story. Yes, you're talking to different audiences. I do get that. But it's about finding the connections. It's about finding the common thread. I have a client I'm working with right now who has been involved in an area of sustainability. And
Mhm.
now she's going in and working with companies on, not even going to get too detailed, but like a corporate training situation. And I pointed out that in both scenarios, her thing is she likes going in, and she came up with these words herself. I just guided her. But her thing is trying to fix systems from the inside, coming into systems and saying, how can we make this work better for everybody? That fits into her corporate sustainability, sourcing work, but that also fits into her corporate training work that she's trying to get into. In both cases, she's trying to take a system that could be better, that could be optimized, that could work better for everybody, and she's trying to use her expertise to fix it. So those things don't need to be separate. She can talk about both of them, because ultimately, I like to think of, skills versus tasks. The tasks involved in those separate jobs are different, but the skills that she brings to the table are the same. So that's a huge part of it, which is don't feel like you need to be a split persona. Don't feel like you need to hide your area you're trying to build expertise in from the area that you are working in, and vice versa. Don't feel like what you're working in bears no relevance to that thing you're trying to build expertise in. There are always common threads. The common thread is you and what you're bringing to it that is satisfying both places. But in terms of how to talk about it with your boss, that is a tricky one. I would say first and foremost, recognize that you're doing nothing wrong, but also make sure you're doing nothing wrong. It is good to familiarize yourself with the exact verbiage in the employer employment agreement that you have. Look at what other people are doing also. Because if there is someone else where you're like, oh, well, they're doing it too, don't go tattling on them when you get called on it. But, it is kind of a good If you're the only one whose head is sticking out, which often happens, it can be a little bit trickier, but make sure you know your rights, make sure you know what you did and did not agree to,
Mhm.
and make sure you come kind of prepared to discuss it from that viewpoint. But I think another thing is also make sure to conduct yourself in a way that's non-adversarial when it comes to the stuff you're putting out there, not being competitive with
Yeah.
the company. You
Or
know,
traded upon some sort of intellectual property that you
yeah.
only have access to through your job.
Yeah, like you should be on the same side. You should be a good ally to your company because then they can realize that you can be a good asset to your company. So make sure that you're conducting yourself in a way that does fit in with your company's values, does fit in with the way that they would also like to be represented. And if that's a point of trouble, if that's something where it's like, well, the way I want to represent myself isn't really aligned with that, then think about if you're aligned with that place of employment, quite frankly. But if you do plan to stay where you are, if you are happy where you are, if you would like to grow where you are, you just also want to grow your personal brand, which I think is a very good idea. Think about, again, go beyond the specific skills, go beyond the specific tasks, go beyond the task specific stuff of your job. Look into the skills that you are bringing to them that you would like to explore further, that you would like to, be in the conversation around, and make sure that it's coming from a place of that, really. Because who can object to skill development? Who can object to continuing to learn and explore in an area that makes you a better employee, quite frankly? I mean, that's my feeling.
And if you are working someplace where they don't want you to have any new thoughts or gain any new skills, again, maybe it's not the best place for you.
Yeah.
'Cause I can't even imagine. That would be no fun. So boring.
Not good.
Um, well, before we open up the floor to any questions that folks have, which, you can already start asking questions if you're listening to this live, you can ask
Bring
those
it on.
questions through LinkedIn or live on Twitter, and Alec will get those over to us. And of course, if you're watching the recap, you can leave questions for Christine and I on the blog post, and I'll make sure that Christine gets those flagged over to her so that way we can answer them. But before we go into that, I have to ask, have you toyed with or have you talked with clients about using AI and AI tools in any of their personal branding work? And the reason I ask this, of course, is when it comes to doing company brand work, I almost always encourage people to define their brand voice, define that style guide, and then use that in conjunction with AI tools when you're doing like proofreading and things like that to make sure that you are having that consistency of voice and that you're not inadvertently all over the place with some of your messaging. So I'd
Yeah.
love to hear your thoughts on that.
So I'll start it out by admitting that I have been way behind on the whole AI revolution. I have not really been using it. However, I have had a lot of conversations about it. I have been reading a lot of conversations about it. I'm paying attention. I just haven't delved in myself. But from the limited perspective of where I am now, I will say the number one thing is, as you pointed out, make sure that you have already created and defined what your brand voice is, what your brand is in general, so that you have things that you have created that you can train the AI on. Because you cannot tell the AI, here's what I want my brand to be, and have it nail it in a way that's actually going to be effective. It's going to be generic. You need to define what you sound like. You need to define how you show up and then feed that into the AI for training, because it needs something to imitate, and that needs to be something that you've created. That's my feeling. I guarantee, I know that there are people out there who will say that they've had great success saying, here's how I want my brand to feel. Here's the things that I want it to embody. And AI spits out great stuff for them that they're happy with, and good for them. But especially for a personal brand, I really think you can't cut the person out of it but you can use AI as a tool to kind of almost replicate yourself in a way, because of course we all wish there were like 10 of us at various times, especially when it comes to consistent content creation.
Totally.
Um, so it can be a huge help. It certainly can solve that issue of content creation is not my job, it's a tool. And like I need time to do my job. Um, but I will say you're not off the hook. I would say, especially for a personal brand, really make sure that you've created stuff and are creating stuff to train it on. Do take the time to train it properly and make sure that you are always in the process, that you are using AI to make things more efficient and to make things much more scalable, not to take yourself out of the equation. I think taking yourself out of the equation is a shortcut to a bland and inauthentic personal brand that people will tune out.
And one that will have entirely too many adjectives used, because that's one of the things that you immediately notice when you read some poorly generated AI authored content. Is
I think people are going to start thinking that I'm an AI then, because I use a whole lot of adjectives. But at the same time, that's me. And you know what? If I trained an AI on my stuff,
but you're not using highly unlikely adjectives either. I think you're very consistent in your use of adjectives. I've just seen some really ridiculous things, and including an entire article that was quite terrible and clearly written by an AI. And as a fellow journalist, the way that I immediately spotted it was in this post. They used the full name, title, and company of a person being quoted in it twice. And that for me was the immediate dead giveaway of it being AI, because a human being would never make that error after introducing the person, saying person first name said. You would never then later do that again. So that was the immediate first. Oh,
and
I
that's
should read
poorly
this.
trained or untrained AI. That's the other thing. You can't just right out of the box expect it to be good. In fact, I've heard of some people, and I love this. I've heard of some people who said, you know what? We slapped our prompt into AI, and what it spat out is our list of stuff that we won't do. Because they said, because AI was able to think of it, is not original for us enough for us.
Yeah. And I think in so many situations, it's going to be the case. And if you are positioning yourself as being innovative and having a different point of view, if you're going to AI to get all of your examples, for example, that's not going to be a great way to innovate. But it is a great way to go out and say, what are people already covering in this area? What are the things that people are already talking about? And then you can even use AI to identify some gaps. Like I'm doing some proprietary research for a client, and I made AI go out and look at all of the research from the last 5 years on their topic. And I said, what are the big areas? What are the gaps? What are the things that aren't being covered around these topics? And that was a really good way to kind of narrow down our starting point. And that was really valuable, because I didn't want to have to read thousands of pages of native research.
Why ever not?
It was much nicer to get the executive summary level kind of thing. So I'm with you.
I do need to start using it for stuff like that, because especially for presentations and things, it's good to be able to find examples. I always slack on that part. And so I think I will start using AI as a research assistant of that sort of
As an
thing.
intern, a trainable intern that you just have to be exceedingly clear about what you're looking for, and that it has to cite its sources and double check them for you.
And a human, I think, should triple check it. Always.
All true. Well, I'm not seeing any questions come in yet, so we may be taking our questions asynchronously, because we can and we will.
Absolutely. And tag me, folks, if you're writing a question later, tag me. I'll get the little notification. I will hop on in. Happy to talk.
So for folks who are wanting to hear more from you about personal branding, what are the best places for them to find you?
Well, I am the only Christine Gritmon, so that is very handy. So if you look up Christine Gritmon, it's me. And I am Gritmon.com. And that's Gritmon with an M-O-N, like there. We spell it wrong. That's fine. Wasn't my name. So yeah, Gritmon.com. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on most of the things. I don't really TikTok, but I've gotten more into threads lately, which is exciting. But I have my weekly podcast, Let's Talk About Brand, and that is a great place to find me. So let's talk about brand on your favorite podcast player of choice. Subscribe to that and learn a new angle on personal branding every single week from my smart guests, and weigh in with your thoughts as well, always, because I always want to have ongoing conversations.
Well, I know I can always count on you for an engaging and fun conversation, and this was no exception. So thank you so much for joining us despite the time zone difference and your travel schedule. We so appreciate you.
I am glad to be here. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Have a great week, everybody.